for coming to the Dash community call for May 17th. It's our 69th meeting today. So what I'm showing on my screen is what we talked about last week and the meeting notes from last week. And we had a huge long discussion around ACL tags matching again, and again how it relates to the P4 behavioral model. So I don't know if y'all read my notes, but it looks like the takeaway is that we needed to come up with a well-designed SAI interface, and we wanted P4 to implement the match logic of the feature. That was kind of the takeaway that I got from the conversation from last week. And that pretty much took up the entire hour. I took these notes. I hope you all got them and were able to go through them. And could someone on the call tell me if you're getting these?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. And so so that's what we had for last week. I don't know if anyone had some ideas in the 7 days since we've talked about how to go about coming together on this, or if I need to start joining the P4 calls or something like that. Did you guys have any ideas?
I did some experimentation and basically did a quick check on the P4 code, updated it to basically produce what I think is the proper APIs. And I did integrate that into my SAI and did some testing, and it works good. But obviously it's the P4 change lookup that doesn't really, I just added here, make sure that it gets compiled and generates what's needed. I needed to add some stuff to RPC to support list and whatnot. But the bottom line is, how do you test that in P4, like as part of the BMV2 regression? I don't know. What I do know is I can produce the proper APIs. To me, proper meaning what was intended.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how we go from there. In my opinion, it's a control plane feature, but it's nice to have APIs for that because everybody can benefit from that.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not you do a data plane lookup to figure out your tag, I mean, that's the problem. How do you figure that one out? It's actually from a prefix you figure out all the tags that are possible because it's a list, and then you use that list alongside the prefix and the F4 ports into the ACL lookup. So from a SAI API, it can be done.
Okay. Thanks, Vincent, for doing that. Does anyone have any questions for Vincent on that?
Yeah, I had one question. Is it possible to use this? I'm not very conversant with the P4 and the BMV2 model, but is it possible to use an extern to do this?
Use an extern? What do you mean?
For the ACL lookup per se, instead of a direct table.
Okay. The problem is to model. The SAI API is generated based on P4, which is unfortunate for this case, or whatever we have now. In my opinion, doesn't work. So it's not even related to the ACL itself. The ACL itself still has the definition now that is run by BMV2 is not exactly what we should be running because it doesn't use list at all, but it's got the source tag and the destination tag there. Now the ternary, so I changed that because that's not proper in my opinion. It should be just a list of tags. So I changed that. But that's minor and that can be changed easily. That's fine. The problem is the ACL tag definition itself. So you kind of need to do a table lookup, if you will, with the proper argument. In this case, it would be a tag to get the proper API that is a tag with attributes, which is a bunch of prefix. You basically need a table lookup that takes a tag and gives you a prefix. And then you have some overrides on the side types and whatnot, but that's the lookup you need, which doesn't really make sense as a lookup. But that's what you need as far as stable definition and do an apply on it in the P4 code to get all that SAI API generated.
Got it. Yeah. Now, what I was this thing I was thinking was if we could handwrite these special APIs, these APIs which are harder to this thing, handwrite them and use an extern to actually do whatever we want to do, right? In that way, we have best of both worlds is what I was wondering.
It's a little bit more complicated than that because not only do you have the SAI API, but you have all the SAI thrift code. You got all the bunch of stuff that gets generated based on that. So you can actually test that. Your SAI API in the test case, in the Python test case, there's a generated set of APIs that move basically based on the SAI API, the P4 definition. So there's a whole lot of things that get generated just on that. So it's fairly transparent. It's very transparent. It's great. But it's not an extern, it's more.
Yeah, I can make a comment on that too. Creating in custom externs creates a different problem. That is, what is the P4 runtime API for that custom extern? Because that's ultimately how we program the BMV2 model. We translate SAI into P4 runtime, and P4 runtime does not, let's say it's not easy without modifying P4 runtime itself to create new extern definitions for the control plane.
I see.
And we're actually working on that very topic right now in the P4 API working group.
I see. Yeah, I was thinking something like that would kind of give us a tool where we can have when it's very tough to generate an API or we run into such problems, I thought it would be a good tool to kind of decouple the complexity of defining the P4 natively versus the clean API. Yeah.
The other problem that begs is, okay, what's going to execute that in our model? We'd have to modify BMV2's backend code to execute that extern in order to get a meaningful output. So it doesn't really fix the problem, it moves it around.
I see. So could that be a C program or something that is written in C that we, and at least the extern kind of defines what we do, but it's still not in P4, but in C.
It's C++, yeah, the BMV2 backend, which is always looking for volunteers to help extend.
The question I have though is, I think from a control plane standpoint, it's nice to have these ACL tags. Now, should the lookup have ACL tags? I don't know that. It would make sense to have though. I don't know. I really don't know. It's a hard problem to fix there. I just don't know how we do it. That's all.
So, I mean, this was, I think, discussed last week, but I think somebody mentioned, maybe John Carney, like the fact that you're generating a SAI API that you want from a P4 program, unmodified, is kind of like the tail wagging the dog. But from the application to the the SAI API you want, make the API you want. It's not that hard, I don't think. I mean, it doesn't need to be auto-generated, does it? Not 100%. Like if the tag stuff is at sticking point, write that part by hand and auto-generate the rest.
So, I mean, I could easily add a table and then apply in the P4 to get what I wanted. And that allows me to test it all the way through. I'm not using BMV2 as my data plane, obviously. But that's the easy part for me. That's the easiest way to do it.
But if you want a data, then you also still want a data plane that behaves.
Yeah, but that's my
model that.
Sure, it still remains
you want the SAI API you want, and you want a reference model that processes packets after you configure it with that API.
Yes,
there's a way to do that. There's a way to do that, but I don't think it's by making the P4 program auto-generate every bit of the SAI API. That seems wrong to me. Okay,
but at the end of the day, it's going to take time to get that BMV2 model to test this. So I think the question is, I think we know what we want. I just don't know what the timeline is for that is.
So if you don't want to hack on BMV2, there's a way to do it. And that would be to handwrite the SAI API for tags and then have a little bit of code above the behavioral model that just expands tags into their prefix lists.
So is that part of the JSON PR? Like you expand the PRT JSON file?
No. At runtime, suppose somebody says, oh, I want to create a tag with this 100 prefixes. Oh, I want to create another tag with this 1,000 prefixes. Oh, I want to create a rule that has that source tag and that des tag. There's a little bit of code that at runtime says, oh, when you create that rule, do the 100 times 1,000 cross product and put that into BMV2. It's just a little bit of C plus C or C++ code that expands out the tags before putting them in the data plane.
Yeah, I just don't know how that relates to the API generation and all that. So anyway,
the API would be written by hand for the tags, by hand, exactly
I
as you want.
think we have discussed it last week as well. So the point is we have a definition now with SAI ACL bitmap struct, right? And if there is another proposal, the community can propose and we can discuss on that. But I think in the current model, this is all flexible. Like we have a capability, and if
No.
the implementation provides a capability of bitmap, we will go with the current model. And then if there is another capability that the implementation can provide, then we can go with the other proposal. So I think
no, look, the prime, we talked about that again last week. We covered all these. The current P4 code with the bitmap just doesn't serve the proper SAI API. It just doesn't work.
so for the current SAI API where it shows 32-bit size bitmap, is that what is the concern?
It's just you basically flip the problem.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, it depends on the SAI implementation because we have the capability, right? So if there is a different capability that the implementation can support, we'll go with the second approach, or the next, or the proposal that you are providing. So define the rest of the things as ACL, how we want the ACL roles to be, and then we can discuss it here as a different proposal.
So what we talked about last week, and it's one in the slides here, is not only is it the SAI API, it's the match logic. What you have now doesn't work, doesn't match at all what you have there. The requirements and what you have are different. I guess that's my point.
The northbound is for SONiC and the org agent to implement, right? So we don't want one-to-one mapping from the northbound to the SAI. So today we have a SAI definition with bitmap, and we have also introduced the capability model. So with that capability model, if that is not the implementation that supports it, fine. Like, so provide a different implementation, and we can discuss the proposal.
No, I'm not even looking about northbound. I'm above SAI.
Yeah,
I'm right.
okay.
I'm right at the SAI level. I don't care
So
about SONiC.
we have a SAI model
hold
now,
on,
right?
Just one thing. The SAI API that you have could make it work. The model you have doesn't have on the left side here. You see the rule mat logic. The lookup you do is told it's not that. It's incorrect. Doesn't match the requirement. The requirement still is at the SAI level and the BMV2 behavior. What you have now doesn't match. I'm sorry.
It matches our requirement, right? I mean,
no, it doesn't. We proved last week that there are problems.
So
it's an or instead of being it's an n instead of being an
so
or,
I
etc.
think those are all clarified in the PR. Like if it is or, we will expand the rule. So I'm not sure. Like if you again, like last week also we discussed, like to go and look at the PR that was
330.
Yeah, about the requirement. So basically, if there is a northbound that has both tags and prefix, the org agent will expand that. So I don't know why we are keep saying like, okay, there is an implicit or assumption that the SAI implementation has to take. So I think the contention here is about the tag bitmap, which there is one proposal, and based on capability, we'll use either that or no tags. Yeah. Or if there is a third proposal, okay, let's have it in the community and we can discuss that.
Prince, for clarification, are you saying, when you keep saying capability, maybe we need to unpack that a bit. Are you saying that the SAI implementation can expose the capabilities and say, I support this particular version of the API, the bitmap one, or in the future, if we have an improved one, I support this one? And you're saying it's up to the target to decide which one?
Yes.
And we can accommodate different ones as optimizations? of the.
Yes,
the
that's
API.
what I meant. Like here in this section, what I defined is if the bitmap is something that the implementation cannot support, it can return, let's say, value 0. So we will not use the bitmap at all.
Have we defined the capability API for
that
this?
we can define easily, right? I mean, that's not something complicated.
Isn't it a common capability API, or will there be?
It can be. I mean, that capability API we can incorporate to either the common section or ACL capability section. So I think that's not the concern. So I thought what we have as a problem is the whole notion of this bitmap and reverse mapping from the prefix to the tag. So we have this proposal. We have the SAI APIs based on this. If there is a second one, I think let's have it as a proposal, and we can discuss how that works.
I think the other problem with the tag, sorry, this is John, I'm speaking. The other problem with the tag is that it forced like a multiplication or a cross product of rules to be inserted.
So again, like if that's all depends on how the SAI is going to be implemented, right?
So if you say you're capable of doing like multiple tags per rule, then only a single rule will be inserted. If you say you're not capable of that, then multiple rules will be inserted. Okay.
Right.
So the question I have is, why are we then, what we have now here doesn't make sense to me. I already say that.
Yeah,
why
I think
we,
the point is then let's make a different proposal. I mean,
my point is, why do we even have that then? Because it's not really usable in my opinion. That's all I'm saying.
That depends on the SAI implementation, right? If there is a SAI implementation that is capable of supporting bitmap of size 8 or 32 or whatnot, right? They can leverage this.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Okay, if the SAI API doesn't look like this, but looks like what we documented last week, what's on the left side.
What is on the left side?
That's kind of the final implementation, if you will. Now you have this solution here that, in my opinion, doesn't work properly.
I mean, sorry, what doesn't work? What doesn't work?
It's flipped backward. It doesn't make sense to me. There are problems with the set. There are problems with various things at the SAI API level. You're gonna basically have the occasion probably replicate rules, do all this extra work until maybe you finalize a different model. You go to another model, and then we all have to rework everything. The SAI API will need to change. It's constant work for something that, why do we even bother right now, I guess, right?
No, I think that's the whole point I'm mentioning. Like we are continue to discuss the same thing over and over again. Like, so we can have all these as a record. Like, okay, for first capability, this tagging is using the bitmap construct. If it's a different one, let's have a proposal, and maybe the work agent implementation can do it in a different way. But
because you flip the API itself, it's not even a tag, it's a list of prefix anymore. So what's going to be the next one? It's going to be totally different. It's going to, I don't know. If we don't have a proper solution now, I don't even know why we bother adding it now.
I think this solution has its advantage if there is a bitmap that can be supported by the SAI implementation, right? And where the mapping is just based on single.
I think the problem with the bitmap, I mean, one problem with the bitmap is that it just doesn't scale to a large, number of tags. What you end up having is an API where you program a prefix with like an extremely sparse bitmap, like maybe 1 bit is set or 2 bits are set in the bitmap. It seems like completely inefficient for like a large number of tags. Where the opposite API, it's efficient no matter whether you have a large number of tags or a small number of tags. It's like a much more efficient API. So I maybe someone says, okay, I'm capable of the bitmap API with a width of 32. I just don't see how a width of 32 tags is even useful, for any kind of deployment. So the API can exist. You could say you're capable of it, but if you're not capable of it at some large
scale
size,
yeah, but that's again like if the SAI implementation can specify the bitmap size of, let's say, 256 or something, it is flexible, right? Like it can extend up to that size.
We go to 4K tags, don't we?
That's for the northbound. That's for the northbound. So based on the SAI capability, the ORC agent can tune to that. So our requirement from a northbound side perspective is 4K.
Yeah,
of course.
and from
I
the
don't know. I
southbound
mean,
side, it's what?
No, southbound is based on the capability.
Right. So Prince, I think my understanding of like why we even want to express tags in the southbound interface is because the data plane implementation might be able to take advantage of it to save memory footprint, or
Yes.
I think that I I think in theory, maybe, yes, I understand that statement. I think in practice, it's almost meaningless. I think that the memory is completely dominated by the flow table. Maybe perhaps if someone were implementing this with PCAM.
I mean, that part, I think we can let the implementation folks to chime in, right? Like if they do save memory based on this model, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it is. It's like anything else. It's a memory versus time trade-off. The tags require you to do more lookup. That lookup can take extra time or extra memory accesses, and in exchange for that, you can save memory. There's a trade-off there, but I mean, looking at this myself, I don't see like any benefit to even supporting tags in the data plane. I think and I guess what you would say is that's fine. You just say you're not capable of tags.
Correct, exactly. That's the point. You just say it is not capable and we'll expand it.
Yeah. Just looking at this as sort of an outsider, since we're not implementing anything ourselves, we'll help test. There's a risk that the particular proposal, as it's been the initial proposal with the bitmap, it's showing a bit of confusion. We have a bit of confusion now, and if you define it as a capability that's optional, why would any vendor? I'll just ask this rhetorical question: why would anyone implement it? Why would they be motivated if it's optional? At this point, someone could say, "Well, this is kind of murky. I think I'll pass." And we haven't gained anything because it doesn't seem to be compelling enough. And if there's no mandatory requirement to do it, why would someone do it unless there was real benefits that are compelling?
Yeah. So basically, if they provide so here, like again, if you don't provide the bitmap, what happens is for each ACL rule, we'll expand the entire list of prefixes to the SAI, right? And that can cause a memory explosion in the SAI implementation. So if they can leverage with the bitmap and can save the memory for their implementation, that's where it comes into.
I see. So there might be a built-in incentive for some range of use cases. And
absolutely.
32 bits is enough to cover use cases of interest?
No, not 32, right? Like it is based on their capability. That bitmap size is based on the capability. So if they return 128 bit, then it can save like enormous amount of memory by not replicating the prefixes all.
Have you got any, without identifying anybody, have you vetted with any vendors that this is going to be compelling value? I mean, outside of this meeting, without naming names?
Yes.
Wait, vendors are fine with the bitmap implementation? Because I wouldn't be.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's what we got the feedback.
The other thing too is even from a BMV2 model, they work. Okay, let's say you stay with that and you do your RPM lookup. Well, you got to figure out there were cases with different prefixes lengths and stuff like that overlap basically where you wouldn't even resolve to the right tag. I think Andy was talking about that.
You would not resolve to the right
No,
tag?
though,
Right.
That's weird. Okay.
I think we had test cases where we had a thought at least to put together, I think Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but a case where it wouldn't be obvious that you would fetch the proper tag. Maybe I'm misunderstood that.
My understanding is if the proposal is that with the bitmaps is if you've got like I don't know, a source rule that has, I don't know, 50 bits set in a 256-bit bitmap and a destination address bitmap that has 30 bits set, then some layer of software before the data plane is going to expand that into 50 times 30 bitmaps. That sounds correct.
mm-hmm.
As far as I know, that's correct behavior according to what they want. It's some expansion. It's much less expansion than if you expanded out the 50 times 30 lists of prefixes, I imagine. So there is some memory savings there, I guess.
But Andy, I think that expansion is only necessary if you don't support the match logic. You know, like if the ACL implementation could support like the correct match or style match logic, then you wouldn't need any rule expansion to support tags, right? So that's
I don't have hardware that does that, but I can imagine hardware that does that.
Right. I mean, you know, like we talked about this last week, like, you know, certainly like in a C algorithm, I could just loop over everything and I could support that kind of match logic, right? You know, it might not perform well, but you can perform that kind of match logic. And so I think that also has to be a capability. It's not just do you support tags? Do you support tags? Do you support bitmap? Do you require rule expansion? Right? Because like I think the rule expansion I think is a big problem. Like I think that you know, maybe supporting tags is good. But you know, one implementation might say, hey, I support tags, but I don't want rule expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think, you know, I think if like in order for this to be sort of flexible enough to allow the implementations to take advantage of you know, tags in order to save memory or in order to perform better, like it's multiple capabilities that have to be expressed for this feature, not just
I agree with you.
Single one.
So that is what I'm saying. That is what also I'm also saying where if the bitmap size is 0, we can introduce another capability that says don't do rule expansion, but I do support tag, right?
Yes.
And that can be another capability, and the work agent can be implemented to just pass the tag list and match to that particular implementation. So
do you realize how complicated this become now? Because
no,
the
because
model in P4 is not proper. I'm just pointing out the fact we're adding now 3 capabilities.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
if we don't have an agreement on one proposal, then we need to have provide that flexibility, right? We cannot make every SAI vendor to implement the same thing that's proposed here, right? So we can have that's why the capability comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what I say. You know, with a simple P4 change, I can create the API that matches what I was expecting, what you call a northbound, but to me that's the same. The SAI API should look the same way. Simple one.
I mean,
there's no capability needed and all that. Now we still have to figure out the BMV2 model.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that if we have that, let's have that as a proposal, and we'll discuss that different model in the.
But it doesn't require all those capability things that we keep piling on.
Yeah,
now.
but we don't have a BMV2 model, right? Like that's what you're saying.
Okay, maybe. So you at that point now, you have this now. You're ready to push. You have all the code written for the site, maybe for vendors, for the occasion to deal with all this complexity now. Even if we know the model is not great, and we need to do more work on the model.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, as far as I can tell, if this intermediate layer software, if you turn on all the capabilities to use bitmaps for tags, make sure that you do the cross-producting of bitmaps with multiple bit sets so that there's at most one bit set, if that's an option that you can turn on, and do 256 bitwide or something like that for like the existing behavioral reference model, I think implements that correctly. It'll just do it's a plain old ternary TCAM table now that it can do if you turn on all those options in the control plane. I don't know, John, if that sounds accurate or not, but as far as
I think I do, but I also think that the requirements of Dash, for example, said that you needed to support 1,000 rules. Well, what is that 1,000 rule requirement once you now tell the orc agent that you're not capable of, doing the match logic? Like the cross product of all of these things is going to be way more than 1,000 rules. This is my biggest concern, is like that I don't want to see the number of rules go from 1,000 to 50,000 just because like this tag feature is there, when like logically the tag feature didn't do anything. It was, logically it didn't do anything. It's supposed to just be a hint to optimize your data plane.
Yeah,
but
I think that's
now, like, what's the requirement for the number of rules? It shouldn't be more than 1,000. Like, if I say that I can support the correct match logic, then I shouldn't be required to support more than 1,000 rules. But if I say that I can't support the correct match logic, what I call the correct match logic, and I'm requiring the orc agent to do cross-product expansion, then what's the requirement? How many rules do you need to support? It's like it's unknown. It comes down to like how many cross products there are. Where like the simple API and the way that it like in defining the match logic allows us to put like a bound on the number of rules.
No, I think that calls for the same argument, right? If the SAI southbound also defined the same way as northbound, and we push that to the hardware, it doesn't mean that the hardware will have exactly that 1,000 rules, right? The implementation may have to expand it to 10,000 rules, right? So
the implementation, yes, the implementation may have to do that.
Yeah, but so I think the same thing with the capability. Like if you return 0 capability, will expand to that 1,000 rules.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't that change the requirement on vendors completely? I mean, you're talking about now you don't support 1,000, you support 10,000 or whatever, right? Isn't that what you're saying?
No, I think if the northbound says 1,000 rules with this abstraction, right? Tags and no cross product expansion, like that's like the northbound, that if you as a data, hey, I support 1,000 rules in exactly that form with the right match logic, then you shouldn't have to support more than the 1,000, right? Like you could support exactly what the northbound supports and it will fit. But if you require your data plane to do cross products, then it's like not clear like how many northbound rules, like what do they translate to when into southbound rules? It could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. I just want to make sure that if you support the rule in the form of the northbound, then the data plane like can be bounded in how many rules it needs to support. I think this is a big problem. I think it's like it's I think it's a big problem because I think someone's going to say, okay, I'm not capable of multiple matches on tags in a rule, and the orc agent's going to start doing the cross products, and then there's no bound on the number of rules that could be sent to the data plane.
Right, where it's such a factor larger than the Dash requirement rules. They're
exactly like the requirement for Dash is 1,000, right? And I think that 1,000 is like from the perspective of the northbound. And so I want to make sure that like if we can handle an API that's like exactly like the northbound API to the SAI layer, then we'd never have to support more than 1,000 rules. Like we've done it. But if you can't support that API, then how many rules do you need to support? You can't, like, I don't even know that you could define it.
I mean, other than the trivial way of whatever the output of the southbound API is, given that top level requirement, which is much larger.
Right. Right.
I have a question regarding all this listening in. Will I be able to do at dash level and SAI level a get and get back what I have set? Because by hearing all these cross products and transforms and so on, fine, on your set you do the logic, but when I do the get, I want to get exactly what I set, not, you know, if I set one ACL rule, I don't want to get back 10,000 in the get, because that's not what I set. So I hope the get will work properly after all these discussions.
I mean,
I
that
don't know
get
how you guys
depends
are
on
gonna do it, but
that get depends on from where you are invoking the get, right? Like if you're
from
invoking
both
from
ways.
north,
If I do a dash, yeah, if I do a dash API get, I should get what I said via that API, and if I do a get at SAI level, I should get what I said via that API. So
yeah, I mean that's
yeah.
the whole
Okay.
SONiC design is according to that, right? Whatever GNMI sets is the AppDB, and whatever Workagent sets is the ASIC-DB. So it's always separate. So depending on the get, because we will not expand the AppDB entries based on the SAI capability or implemented. It stays as it is, right? So the user will always see only what they have set.
I just want to make one more statement. You don't need tags in order to implement an indirection. Okay, like where you do a prefix lookup first and then you do an ACL lookup. Like you don't need tags to do that. And I know that like you say, oh, the tags is like a hint to the data plane to be able to take advantage of it. But you know, there are algorithmic ways to be able to like take any set of rules with you know, whatever cross products and be able to map that into multiple lookups or however you want to do it. Like the tags is actually like, if someone says we require tags in order to save memory, in a sense, it's that it's a laziness. Like they didn't actually need the tags. They could have factored those tags themselves. Like it's you know, it maybe helps save some computation in like factoring the rules, but like the tags isn't in of itself what allows you to save memory. It's the fact that the ACL can be split into like two stages of lookup, one where you look up the prefix and then where you do, let's say, a ternary kind of match, right? And you don't need to express the rules with tags in order to be able to do that.
John, I mean, here's an alternate view. Forget the data plane for a second. Imagine it just works somehow. From the user's perspective, tags are extremely useful for naming things, right?
Totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think that tags are like an abstraction that makes total sense to the user.
In the northbound API, right?
And I'm perfectly happy with tags being in the SAI APIs. Like I have no problem with the tags being in the SAI APIs. What I have a problem with is the bitmap being sort of an inefficient API when you try to scale it to a large number of tags.
So I think it was sorry, I don't know if it's Sunny or Prince. Sorry, I don't know.
It's Prince. Yeah.
Prince. Sorry.
Prince. Yeah.
I think Prince saying, well, if there's a different southbound API that somebody else proposed later that doesn't use a bitmap, here's a really trivial one. Pass down exactly what the northbound API said, and let the downstream do whatever it wants with expand the tags however it wants to or not.
That's what I did. That's what I have.
Exactly.
I mean, granted, it's based on the P4 table update, but that's exactly what I have.
Yes. Getting that into a P4 program requires some extra computation that, like, with maybe different options than the Workagent has. We talked about today with the bitmaps, but at least it allows the southbound, below the southbound, to decide however it wants to expand those out or not.
Right, and I agree with you, Andy. I think that like I was under the impression that the tag API was sort of a result of, you know, P4 simplicity. But what I heard today is that no, the tag API is a result of a vendor that can take advantage of it.
The bitmap representation of the tags.
Yeah, or even sending tags to the data plane at all is like you know that there's you know vendors that can take advantage of that, and that's fine. And like I said, I personally am not opposed to like the APIs including tags. I just don't like the bitmap API, and I don't want to require the rule expansion. I want to make sure that if you could support the, like you said, the northbound API, like with all of the abstraction that it has, if you could support that directly in your data plane, then you shouldn't have to do rule expansion. So those are my concerns: the bitmap and the rule expansion. Other than that, I'm perfectly happy with tags.
I would say propose a southbound API that just copies everything down for the northbound API, and even if your hardware can't support that, you've got some driver level software that turns it into something your hardware supports.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, let's have a proposal for that, and also define the behavioral model, and then we can definitely consider that.
Okay. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
We're not at each other's throats.
No, you're great. No, I mean, it's good conversation. I think I got more understanding just by sitting here listening to you guys and splitting it out into the 3 different categories and figuring it out. So thank you. Was there, it's 9:45 already. Geez. Was there any other item to talk about today? I saw some new stuff coming into the PR queue. It's 15 minutes left. Did any of y'all want to talk about these items today, or
that top one updated
okay.
side challenger to latest? So Peel Vision has been, you know, improving side challenger regularly, and they finally want to update Dash to, let's say, a recent snapshot, and I'm okay with it, and it passes all the CI tests, so I see no reason why not to merge this in.
Okay, all right. And this one, did it have any Chris and Andre? And so we just need a merge. Okay, I'll take a look at that today.
Thank you.
Yep. And anyone else? We just have fast path metering, tagging. The NAT HLD was going to be Alibaba when they're ready. Vladimir said this would take a few weeks to look at, and I need to go through and do some cleanup here. Private link mapping. Marian, did he drop Marian? Hey, Sasha, do you know anything about this one, the private link mapping? Or Alexander, I mean?
No, Marian.
Okay, all right. So that's all I have, guys, unless you have anything else.
One thing, thing, Christina, I just wanted to mention. Vijay had raised this PR for Beatring, just a request for the community to take a look at the PR.
Oh, great. All right. Do we want to talk about it now for a few minutes and ask people to look at it, or what do you want to do, Sanjay?
I think it's about the same as what Vijay had this thing. I'll think Vijay is on mute.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we have discussed the requirements and the proposal is pretty much there in the HLD. So maybe if people can just take a quick look today, and then we have the behavioral model meeting tomorrow. We can discuss it tomorrow. Is that okay?
Discuss in the behavioral model meeting. Is that okay with you, Prince and everyone else?
Yeah, we have taken a look at this PR 365, and there is SAI and also the BMV2 changes here. We're going through that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Vijay. That's awesome. It looks like there's a couple of there's a comment in there for you. So yeah, let's talk about it tomorrow then. Sound good? Okay, great. Let's put a note there for BMB2 meeting. if I could type. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll do Andy's 7-second rule. Is anything else to talk about today in particular? So hard for me to wait the 7 seconds.
In my head after I asked the question.
Yeah. Okay. Then I guess I'll stop the recording and hope everyone has a good day. And thanks for the conversation today. It made it a lot more clear in my head. And thanks for doing all that testing, Vincent. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. All right. You guys have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.